Hi, this is Pastor Mendenhall, and we want to welcome you to our second of a series in God's transforming power from darkness in one's life to light. And we've been talking with Mitchell Perkins, who is a Marine, was deployed in 2003, joined in 2001, and was deployed in 2003 to Iraq. And we're picking up our conversation now where Mitchell landed in Iraq and was on his very first tour. So you've kind of talked to us a little bit, Mitchell, about how your life was one of those places where it was filled with darkness, and you felt that rage and that anger and all those things that came with that darkness. But what was it like when you stepped your foot in the soil of Iraq and then began your first tour?
Well, when we first got there, we deployed off and we were sitting in Kuwait. We sat in Kuwait for about a month, and that was just kind of bad, just because you're sitting around. The waiting game really starts to play with you, and you get to the point where it's like, well, if we're going to do this, let's do this and let's get it over with, because the sooner I start, the sooner I can be done. And I remember that right before we went in, they brought in a whole bunch of, I think it was Domino's pizza or something. And they gave us our last little meal, gave us some pizza. And then we mounted up and we moved to the border, and we're waiting, and we kind of crossed over the border, and we started in. And then all of a sudden, you knew when the war started, because the entire horizon just started to light up. I mean, everything. Just bombs going off everywhere. And you're seeing anti-air tracers off in the distance. Over to our right, they set the oil fields on fire, so it starts shooting up and spitting everywhere. And it was actually just it was a wild sight at 19. You're just kind of like, wow, this is intense. And you're going through and pushing, and I was part of 1-4 infantry, and so we were with the RCT-1, which was the regimental combat team, and they had 3 of those, made up of a few battalions in arty and armor, and we were to go right up the gut, and 5 was supposed to go secure the oil fields, and the 7th Marines, they were to go to our left. And so we started going up, and I think for the first day we didn't really have any contact until the next night. And then we got into contact, and the first night, and it's complete pitch black, and all of a sudden, just boom, 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 boom. It just starts lighting up. And when it started and the tracers went overhead, my adrenaline hit. And so my friend, he's up on the 240, and he cranks it off, and I hear, ta, 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 ta. I'm like, oh man, that's awesome. My adrenaline, everything just slowed down. I didn't know that was a real thing. I'm like, wow. And so at that point, because of the darkness and the NVGs, and you hadn't slept because of your nerves, none of it seemed real. I mean, it was almost surreal at the time, and it almost felt a lot like any training exercise you did. And then we pushed until we got to another city, our first really major engagement, which was Nasiriyah, and we went up, and that's where you started seeing, like, okay, the effect of this. And then from there we went, and our medics and stuff, we bought as much RIP fuel and all these supplements that we could have to help keep us awake. We were getting caffeine pills from the medics to help keep us awake. And we would stay awake, stay awake, stay awake until you hallucinated. And my first hallucination was I saw a bush pick up itself like a dress and run across the desert, sit down, slide all the way back. And I looked at my buddy and I was like, I think it's time that I take a nap. But I told him, I said, before I shut my eyes, you keep an eye on that bush. He's suspect. And so as we went through the, I didn't mind so much the battles in the desert, but as you got into the urban environment, it started to, not only did the stress come up because you're having the battlefield go from 2-dimensional to 3-dimensional, you have a mix of civilian versus enemy combatant, and unlike video games or anything like that, you start to see the reality of combat, and you can dismiss it with an enemy combatant. It's not the easiest, but you get to the place where, okay, you do that, and you can rationalize it. Well, it's them or me, and you're sitting here on this push, and you're going so fast that you're never really having time to actually process anything emotionally, because the second this is done, we're secure, we're re-ammoing up, and then we're moving forward to the next engagement. And as we did that, you started seeing the kids and the civilians get hit, and that starts sticking with you when you see that, because there's just something really wrong about that. But even though you're in that and you're witnessing this untold horror, and you're just seeing things that you never thought you would see, that training never really prepared you to see. And even though it's traumatic, you got to move on. So you just kind of throw that in the back of your head and you go on to the next objective. And there's more trauma, and you throw that in the back of your head and you go on to the next objective, and on and on and on. And by the time I was done, I witnessed a good friend. He was a corporal over me while I was a lance corporal, and he had an event where in one of the cities he fired his 40 Mike right through a window. We were pinned down and we were taking AK fire. We got cover returning. He got his grenade launcher. He fired it right through the window. It was a beautiful shot, and it exploded. Go through. They're clearing the house. And when he went inside to clear the room, well, there was the combatant. He got him, but there was also a family that was hiding. And so he got to see firsthand what a 40 Mike does to toddlers. And he did it. And so he was never right after that. And I watched the command isolate him and then remove him and send him home. Because fear is infectious. And so it wasn't his fault. He was a great man, and you can't hold that against him. We went through Baghdad. We took Baghdad, and we were sitting up there. And while we were up there, we were in this place that we called Sniper Alley. We were taking sniper fire constantly. We had snipers up on the tower in the Bath Party headquarters, big old cigarette factory, and they were just sniping all night. We'd have rounds, and at this point, you're just so used to getting shot at that you don't even really try and take cover. You just kind of roll over. You're like, well, that one's not going to get me. He doesn't have a good angle, and you just go to sleep. You don't even bother with it anymore. And as I'm going through with this, you don't process, you're waiting to go home. You were told, well, we'll go home once the enemy is defeated and we take Baghdad. Baghdad has been taken. It's May, and then we're waiting, and we get pushed back and pushed back and pushed back. My unit just kind of, I don't know what happened. My unit didn't get out of there till September. And in fact, our support units, they went and they left before us, so we had to start pillaging army rations, go to armies and beg for MREs and stuff.
Okay, so Mitchell, you've said that you were just in a blitz and you were
Mm.
going city to city, and just all of the destruction, all of the death, all of the things that you were experiencing that you said you've never even dreamed you would experience before. You weren't prepared for that. You just kept
Mm.
categorizing that in the back of your mind. How did that play out for you going forward in driving that darkness deeper in your life?
The weight that I had from about June to September when we got out, it really was a series of, as far as what I was used to, it was inactivity. It wasn't without firefights, but it wasn't just this constant barrage. You had a couple raids, you had patrols that you had to do, you had fire watch. Really was boring. And during that time, we got sat phone, and I was married at the time. And so that's when I found out that my then wife at that time was not being faithful. But we got married at 18. I am now 19. I had just turned 20. And over the course of 2 years being married, I maybe saw her 6, 7 months. So I'm taking a young kid, asking her to commit. Then I'm never there because I'm always in the field, training or deployed. Then when I am there, I'm treating her the way that I know how love is displayed growing up. So I was not a good husband, and she went and sought another man while I was gone, and that absolutely crushed me. And now I'm kind of in this weird moral, I guess, dilemma where you've gone through all this combat, you're allowed to unleash all this violence, and here's this person that has really hurt you, and you're told, well, you can't be violent towards them. And I'm trying to process and rationalize, well, I'm violent towards these people. I got nothing against these people, really, but here's this person. This person I really want to be violent to because you hurt me. And so with all of that, I had my command sit down, talk with me, and they let me, they're like, hey, let Mitchell be on the gun. Let Mitchell, anything that they thought we were going to go see something, hey, send Mitchell. Like he needs to work through some stuff. So let him work through it. I mean, Marine Corps therapy. And so when I got back, I came back to no money. I came back to no wife, no nothing. I got a box of clothes. Some of the clothes weren't even mine. And I got my TV. And so I went to the barracks. And in the barracks, barracks life is it's pretty lonely. It's a pretty depressing place. But the good thing is you got the guys there, but when you're going from having a wife and a life to this is now your life. It's like you're not trying to be disrespectful to the boys. It's like you're not a good exchange. But they really helped me through it. And but while I was there in the barracks, it was at that time that I'm coming back, and all of a sudden everything that I had seen but I hadn't dealt with starts coming up in nightmares. and I'm not the only one. So I got to the point that I was having nightmares almost every night. I wake up, I'd be soaking a bed in sweat, and I would absolutely drench a mattress and wake up. And so I'd walk around at night, um, out at Camp Horno, and I'd just be walking the barracks, and you'd hear guys whimpering and screaming, and all this stuff that happened, is starting to come up for everybody. And and then you have to go to work, and so you put your bootstraps on, you go through it, and you're handling your business, and nighttime comes, and you're really not wanting to go to sleep, so you kind of stay up. And the only the only thing that we were told at that time was, well, you guys have seen a lot and you've done a lot. So what I want you to do is go out and drink a lot of beer and chase some women until you feel better. And so I'm like, well, I'm 20. I'm like, that must be sound advice. And I do it, and it doesn't help. It doesn't make me feel better. And so now it's like, well, now what? And they didn't call it PTSD at that time. They didn't really call it anything. What the military called it was cowardice. That if you if you if you said that you had any of these issues, you didn't possess a warrior's mindset. And so nobody was going to let your command know, like, I'm having these issues. Like, no, because none of us were going to out ourselves like that. Even though we all knew we were having issues and we could lean on each other, you absolutely were not going to let your command know that these issues were taking place.
So you're 20 years old now. You've been through your first deployment.
Yep.
You've had all this stuff that's happened to you, that you've experienced.
Yep.
You've been completely shattered in your emotional life with the loss of your marriage, and now you're dealing with all of that stuff now. It's compiling, and you have nowhere to go.
Sure.
So that deepens the darkness in your life.
Yeah. And then we go on post-deployment leave, and I come back, and I'm 20, and I see friends that you grew up with high school, and all of a sudden there's just this gap that has happened in your life to where everybody else is on this wavelength and you're over here. Like, I can't relate to anything you guys are talking about. I can't relate to anything you're dealing with. You're talking about this and that, and like, I've gone through war. I'm completely seeing life through a different lens. I thought I hated God before, but after war, that cemented it. There is no God. And people be like, oh, there's a God of love. There is no God with what I have seen. That is not loving. There's just nothing but death, pain, and misery. And so, while I'm over here, they're teeny bopping and Justin Biebering, and I'm coming back and I'm having all these issues. And then I'm also having to kind of be disrespected, I felt at the time, where I'm 20, I'm not 21, so nobody treats you like an adult, but I've just gone through more adult experiences than most adults ever will in their life. Whereas, I've gone through the military, married, divorced, war, but you can't drink. And I'm like, that never made sense to me. That it's not that I really wanted to drink, it's that you didn't view me as mature enough to drink. And so,
what an incredible thing to have to deal with at such an early age. We're talking in our Hope series with Mitchell Perkins again, talking about darkness, and Mitchell has shared with us his first deployment and what he went through and the issues that he had in that first deployment. We have much more to talk about in our third series, and I hope that you will come back and watch with us on our third series of God's delivering power from darkness into light. This is our Hope series, and we are talking with Mitchell Perkins.